Here is 5.3, day 3, part 2. We're going to focus on this thing called the zero product property. We're going to solve these two equations for x using the zero product property. I would recommend that you write these two examples down. So we'll start with example A. X squared minus 64 equals 0. We want to find out what is the value of x. Well, we could probably do it in our head. So we'll say what times what. So 8 times 8 is 64. 64 minus 64 is 0. So our value is 8. We don't want you to do these in your head, but that's kind of the thought you're thinking. Maybe we want to find out what is x in our head. So we should be getting 8. And let's see what happens. So we're going to use our factoring again. So we're going to factor x squared minus 64 equals 0. So we look at how many terms there are. There's 2 terms. It's a binomial. So we look to see if we can factor using the difference of 2 squareds, which we can. X squared is a perfect square. 64 is a perfect squared with 8. So I factor. I can split up the x's as x and x, and I can split up 64 as 8 times 8. And remember what goes in the middle is the minus and the plus. Here is where the zero product property is helping us now. We're going to take each factored part, so each parentheses, and set them equal to 0, and then solve for x. So we'll start with this first parentheses. We say x minus 8 equals 0. And then we solve that equation for x. So we're going to solve by undoing. So we're going to add 8. So x equals 8. Then we do the same thing with the second parentheses. We set that equal to 0. And we solve for x by undoing. So we subtract 8. So we get x equals negative 8. So in this question, we get 2 solutions. We get when x equals 8 and when x equals negative 8. We do want you to verify those solutions by plugging them back in to the original equation. All right, let's go over to example B. Go ahead and write down example B. We want to solve this equation for x. So now we have a trinomial. Its leading coefficient is 1. So we're going to use the T-chart method. So we set up our T-chart. And we say, what are the factors of C? So what are the factors of 16 that sum to the middle term, B, which is 17. And then we list off all the different possibilities. Well, you might be able to see now that 16 times 1 is 16. When you add those two numbers together, you get 17. If you are getting comfortable with the T-chart method to be able to do those in your head, by all means go ahead and do that. You don't need to continue writing the T-chart down if you can do it in your head. Sometimes mistakes happen when you have pluses and minuses in there, so sometimes it's a good idea to just write those T-charts down. All right, so now let's go ahead and factor that. So remember, we split up the equation into 2 parentheses, and then we split up the x squared into x and x. And then on the left side here, the 16 and the 1 is plus 16 plus 1. So what we have is the equation factored. Now we're going to apply the zero product property. We're going to set each factored part equal to 0 and solve for x. So we'll start with the first one. X plus 16 equals 0. And now we solve by undoing. So I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. X equals negative 16. Then we'll do the same thing with the second parentheses. X plus 1 equals 0. Set it equal to 0, solve for x. Solve by undoing. So we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. So we get x equals negative 1. So our two answers are negative 16 and negative 1. We could check them by plugging them back into the original equation. Here will be your assignment for tomorrow in class. Remember, there is going to be a quiz after we are done factoring using this green factor worksheet. And notice there are some problems back in your textbook which focus on the zero product property. You can write this assignment down now, or you can wait until class tomorrow.